Hi there, and thanks so much for joining me for another video. I'm Erin Eno, and today we are going to have fun using a bunch of different watercolor techniques to paint this pretty abstract floral. If you do like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and also to see more beginner-friendly tutorials, please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell so you know when I have new videos out. Now let's get painting. Today I'm using my Baohong Academy cold press watercolor paper. It's 140 pound, 100% cotton. I have my Royal Talons Van Gogh paints in my palette, a jar of water and a paper towel, and I have 3 brushes. I have a Curry's 2500 series in a size 12 round. I have their size 6 round in their 2400 series, and I have a Princeton Snap flat shader in a size 16. You will definitely need a brush like this that has some stiff bristles because we're going to be putting paint down and picking up, and I find that something with a blunt edge and some stiffer bristles is best for picking up paint. So let's just jump in and get started. Now this is a fun painting to do when you just want to let loose, because we're just going to be piling painting on and picking it up and moving it around, and there's a little fruit fly flying around. So there's no rules, and you just kind of paint and have fun. So to form the flowers, we're going to be using basically negative painting. That's why we're going to take paint away and paint kind of around the flower, so you'll see as we get into it. So just to start, I'm just going to put some paint. No, I'm going to put water on my paper, just kind of randomly, just so the paint kind of moves on the paper as I put it down in kind of random areas. You don't have to do that. Oh, what you do have to do though is if you're not painting on a block, we're going to be using a lot of water. So if you're not painting on a block, if you just got a sheet of paper, definitely tape it down to a board or something so it doesn't warp, because we'll be using, like I say, a fair amount of water. So I think what I will start with is a light kind of turquoise. Let's start with that. And you can also, before you start, kind of roughly draw in with very lightly with the pencil where you want your flower heads to be. You don't have to do that, just kind of keep it in mind. So yeah, let's just jump in. So I'm just gonna put in some random paint, just like so. Okay, and then eventually we will be pulling out the shapes of our petals, and as we kind of paint around them, they're going to pop off the page even more. Okay, so I've got kind of 2 in place there. I could do a third one maybe up here, just kind of going off the page maybe. It really doesn't matter at this point. And I think to kind of complement the turquoise, maybe we'll go in with some Prussian blue, put a little bit of that in my palette. And I'll just put some down here. And you're just going to just kind of randomly and do like just strokes like this even. Okay? So you're just kind of playing around at this point. You could even just pop in some water to get some blooms there. Go back in with a bit of the turquoise. Maybe take some Payne's gray. Not that much. Let me lighten that up a bit. Okay, and you can just kind of drag out strokes. Maybe we'll mix up a little bit of green. I'm going to mix up some sap green and some olive green. We can plunk some of that in there just to get some greenery. You can just rinse off your brush, kind of soften this out a bit. And then I'm going to go in with my flat shader now, and I'm going to wet it so it's just clean, not sopping wet. It's just damp. And we're just going to start picking up some pigment where we have those flower heads. If it's not picking up so much, you can go in with some water, dry off your brush, pick up some more. You can even go back in and just do some lines in your flowers like so. Get a bit more of that turquoise on my brush. And I'm still using the flat shader at this point because I'm just kind of playing around. So now you can just pick up. So you're just putting paint down and picking it up. And you can do some deliberate kind of petal shapes if you want. Okay, so you can see I'm really pushing down. That's why it's nice to have a brush that has stiff bristles. And I don't know why, every time I go to record, the dog comes out next door. I'm just going to tap a little hint of a center in these flowers now, just a little bit, maybe just off to the side there. Now I'm going to go in and start adding in some deeper colors. So I'm going to go back to, actually, you know what? I think we'll play around with the size 6 now. And again, go into the Prussian blue. Maybe mix a bit of that turquoise in there. So you can just kind of draw that out with a damp brush, like so. I'm coming right up to those flower heads at this point. You can even just go in and do a little indentation where you want some petals to be, just like that. Bring some in here. And as it bleeds into the flower, you can go back in and pick up some more of that pigment. Also, put some splatters in there if you want. So I'm going to go back to the Prussian blue with my size 12 brush. Sorry, 12 brush, and just put some splatters in. I want some up there and they're not going up there. There we go. And I'm going to go back and, whoops, that was not the right color. With the turquoise again. Maybe a bit of that green again. Maybe some over here. And you see I'm just kind of tapping it in and not really worrying about what it does at this point. You can leave harsh edges. You can blend it out if you want, or just kind of quickly drag it out, just like that. Then I'm going to go back into the flat shader and pick out some more petal shapes here. So you can see, because it's wet, once you pick it up, you're picking up the water and the wet paint, but it still leaves a somewhat wet edge. So the edge of the petals are kind of soft. And when we go back in and add some deeper pigment around those petals, because we're picking this paint up, we're picking up the moisture as well. So the darker colors you put beside it are not going to bleed into the flower too much. Okay, and I want to pull this flower back out like so. Maybe bring some petals down here. So the flowers are going to appear on the whitish shade, but there is tone in there, so it leaves it with some interest and some definition. This will be like a side view. I can go back in and just kind of add some pigment there. Maybe just kind of blend that out a bit. You could go in with the size 6 brush again and go in with the green, maybe a bit of Payne's gray with that green. I'm going to mix just a tad more green. It's not realistic, so it's not like you definitely have to have green leaves. You can not even do leaves if you want, but I just want maybe a hint of some leaves, kind of just blending softly into the background, and just some greenery just like that. So I'm going to come up, and like I say, because we've picked up the water there, a lot of the moisture, see how it's not bleeding too much into that flower. So you just keep playing like this until you get the look that you want. I can drag this out. I can soften it. Add a little more blue just into the edge of this one. See how it's bleeding out but not into the flower because we've picked that moisture up out of that petal. I think I'll plunk in some yellow now. I've got some Azo yellow medium. Let's tap some of that in. Yellow's always nice to throw in when you don't know what your painting's missing. A lot of the times I find that if the painting's lacking something, that yellow seems to be the color that makes things kind of pop a little bit. So I'm going to go in and get maybe some indigo. Now mix it in with that blue that I was using and just tap some in here just to get some darkness against those petals. Just like so. Maybe a little bit up here. Maybe some in with that green. Okay, and you can soften the edge of that. You could even take a dry brush and just drag some of these lines down just for some interest. And if your edges are hard, because we took that water away, you can always soften them if you want, or just leave it as a dark edge. Again, just drag some of this out. Maybe a little more over here. So it's just trial and error, playing around. Maybe drag some of that down. And I think I'm just going to do a little bit more down here. Maybe I'll take some of the green just to get maybe a hint of a couple of stems. Just like that. Like I say, this is really abstract, so you don't really need specific stems. And I don't want to overdo it, so I don't want to really put some leaves in here that are kind of so deliberate. So I'm going to go back to my number 12 brush. And maybe just soften this edge a bit. Soften that kind of leaf shape out. And I'm going to put a little bit more tone down here. I think I will go back to the turquoise that I had and just tap some in there. And then to kind of keep some brightness down there, tap in some yellow. I don't think I want to introduce any red or pinks at this point. Throw in some indigo. This almost looks like another flower down there now that I did that. See that harsh edge? So it's kind of looking like some petals, which is kind of cool. Maybe we will make that a little flower there. So I'm just going to wet this. Go in with my flat shader. Kind of pick that up. Maybe do a little hint of a center on that flower, just like that. Again, there. And I'm just going to soften that. So you've got this soft little flower just kind of peeking through. And I think I'm going to re-wet this, see if we can get some sort of petal pulled out of that area. So it kind of looks like a side view. He's turned on his side just a little bit. Go back with my size 6 brush and that indigo. I don't know, it's indigo, Prussian blue, turquoise, it's all mixed together. And I'm just going to do just a little hit, just there. And again, you can see it's getting slightly a soft edge, but it's not bleeding like crazy because we picked up most of the water that was there. So I'm just going to blend this out just a little bit, drag it out a bit. Maybe go in, plunk some more yellow up here, just kind of going off the page. I think it needs a little bit more darkness down here. And we're losing the shape of that flower that I had kind of discovered by accident. So I'm going to go back to my flat shader and just pick up that flower again. Like that. Maybe bring it out just a little more. And it still needs a little bit of weight down there. So I'm going to go back to that to the indigo, and I'm going to come up to that flower just like that. And hopefully it won't bleed in too much. I'm going to take a little bit more indigo. The indigo is quite intense. I'll add a little bit more to there, maybe a little here too. And I don't want it going too blue on me, so I will take a little bit of yellow again, maybe. just to brighten it up. You can just drag some out, just like that, just with a flick. And I don't know if I'm really big on the shape of what's going on down there. I'm just going to see if I can soften that a bit. So I'm just re-wetting it. And again, I'm going to go back in with my flat shader and just see if we can kind of lighten this up a bit, make it look like maybe a petal on a separate layer, just like that. And I'll take my number 6. So with my number 6, I'll go back into the green and just tap some in there. And again, just with a wet brush, not sopping wet, I'm just gonna kind of drag some of that out. And I just want to soften up what's going on down here. Maybe add in a little yellow. Just to kind of brighten it up down here. I want a lot of color down there, but I don't want it to start going muddy on me. And maybe I'll go to the turquoise again and maybe just do a little bit down there. I do like the turquoise color. It's a nice color, but it's not too intense, so it doesn't tend to overtake too much. I'm just going to tap a little bit of indigo down at the bottom here. Yeah, it needed some separation down here. That can kind of look like maybe a leaf or some greenery. Okay, and I don't want to disturb it too much, so I'll just go in with my number 6 and just kind of blend that out, soften it, maybe drag up some lines just like that. And they're going to fade out, bleed out, and get a little faded. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my Payne's Gray, and I'm going to tap a little bit in the center of these flowers. So now I'm going to rinse and dry off my brush just a little bit and kind of drag some of that Payne's Gray out, and it's going to kind of form just these random lines that are going to separate and indicate some petals. You don't have to think about it, just kind of let it do whatever it wants to do. That was a little bit too much water on my brush, I think, but it's okay. We're just going to go back in and do the same thing. Like that. Do a little more here. This one really bled out, so I'm going to pick up some of that water. See how that's forming nice kind of layered kind of petals? Now I want that to kind of calm down and dry a little bit, but I think I'm going to make this pop just a little bit more. Maybe add some Payne's Gray in there just to deepen up that green. I'm not adding black because I don't want it to get too muddy on us. I'm going to leave that. Maybe soften the edge of that little flower. That mystery flower that kind of came out of nowhere. just like that. Now I'm going to go in with black. I'm using a non-granulating black. Using a granulating black might be kind of neat in something like this, and I don't want this black to bleed out too much, and I don't want it to be too strong. So again, with my number 6, I'm just going to make sure that it kind of keeps a little bit of a soft edge, but not drag it out too much. This one, there's way too much black in this guy. I'm actually going to sop up some of that with my paper towel. And maybe just lighten this just a little bit. Now we're losing some depth down here, so I'm just going to go back into that indigo, tap it down here again, maybe tap a little more there, and I want this to soften up a tad. Maybe just drag some out. And there seems to be something weird going on my paper there. It's resisting. So while that indigo is still wet, I'm going to go in and dry off my brush and just kind of drag some of that up. So when I stepped back to take a look at this, I felt that it was kind of a little off balance and needs a little more weight down there. So I was kind of hesitant to put in too much indigo right out of the gate down here, but I think I'm going to darken up this whole left bottom corner. Maybe get some yellow in there as well, just so it doesn't get too heavy. And I think that will be much better. Maybe even just take some up the side there. So I'm just going to soften that edge. And maybe take the turquoise with just a little bit of that indigo and just kind of dab some over here. I don't want it to get too bottom heavy, but it just looked a little not quite balanced. Okay, so just little flicks just to get some interest in there. I don't like those white holes. Let's get rid of those. I think it can also use a little more depth in some of the petals over there, so I'm going to go back into my Payne's Gray, just tap some into the middle, maybe even put a bit of that turquoise indigo in there, so when I pull it out, it's got that same kind of hint of the turquoise. See that? That just gives that flower a little bit more depth. And I'm trying not to be too deliberate with it. Okay, maybe we'll do the same thing here. The turquoise, a little bit of Payne's Gray. I don't want that deliberate a line, but you could even go in with some water and just tap it in here to get some kind of blooms down there, just for some texture. Maybe even here. So with that, I think I'm going to drag my brush handle through here just to kind of get some implied stems, just like that. Okay, so while the paint's wet, you just drag your brush handle through there. Okay, just like that, just for a little something. So now I'm going to call this done, and I don't want to speed it up with my heat tool, but I do want it completely dry before I take it off the board, because otherwise it's just going to warp on us. And yeah, so we'll step back and we'll come back and take a look. So I think this is dry enough to take off the board now, but before I do, I just wanted to point out down in this corner where I wanted to kind of anchor it with a darker color, it can kind of overtake, but you can see how it's just something as simple as dropping in a few drops of water will create these kind of blooms and just soften things up down there. So I really like what happened there. So let's take the tape off and see what it looks like. So there you go. There is our abstract floral, and doing a painting like this is a lot of fun. You get to try out a lot of different techniques. We did washes, we did bleeds, we did splatters, we did lifting, we did blooms. It's all there. It's all in a painting like this, and the results that you get are really kind of pretty and interesting. So I hope you found this tutorial helpful and that you will give this a try. I highly recommend it. That's it for today, guys. Thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.